Hi everyone, back with another battle report from the Oldhammer Winter Warfare tournament I played last Saturday. We're into the second round. After I did well in the first round, I was playing against Mark and his Wood Elves, which was a great pick for the tournament. If you've been following the channel, sorry, we've had a number of battle reports on the missions here where there were towers in the first map, but in the second and third map, you needed to have probably more standards than your opponent. So Mark, I think, was able to pull together 8 standards, but being on horseback was probably the difference in the end. And he and Paddy Gallagher did quite well playing Wood Elves in the tournament overall. I think they're a smart choice. So if we look at the board, this game is going to be won by table quarters, where you have to have standard bearers wholly within a table quarter, and then the person who controls them, you get 1 point for that. And then if you control more table quarters than your opponent, you get an extra 3 battle points. That's on top of the regular kill points, where for every 250 kill points, you're starting to get some separation from your opponent in the battle points that you earn. So in this game, this was unusual in the sense that Mark was one of the few players who could outdrop me. By now, you might know I have my chariot, Razor Gore in the middle, Razor Gore chariot setup on the wings. And I've put my herdstone in the bottom left out the front again after it did reasonably well in the first game that way. And my general strategy is to have the dragon ogres sort of protect the herdstone and control it with the Bestigor, who have the no fly banner, which is not going to be any good in this game. And then roll forward with the Shaggoth and the gigantic spawn and use the shaman beneath that to shoot things with magic missiles. So I had a Minotaur, 2 Minotaurs, and 2 units of 5 Gores in ambush for this game. Mark had 2 units of Wild Riders that he put that without line of sight on his flanks. You can see that he's got 2 units of Treekin, which were the stars of the tournament, 2 Deepwood Scouts, which came down as scouts. He has a Glade Rider bus with the Oaken Stave level 4 in there, and he has a level 2 with Lore Familiar over here with Pillar of Fire and Fireball in a unit of Glade Guard that are in the forest. Another unit of Glade Guard at the back, and some Sisters of the Thorn as well. So the War Dancers had a Shadow Dancer in them without magic items too, but generally that's the setup. And I won the first turn. He actually outdropped me, which is incredible because I think I have about 13 drops, and I got to go first. I was able to roll really well with the spawn. I got 17, which got me right into the forest. An incredible start. I did what I normally do and pushed up the Razor Gore with the chariot in support on the left flank. And the Shaggoth I also marched so that it'd be touching the forest, so I would have some sort of line of sight through the forest if I wanted to use that. On top of that, in the middle, I pushed the Dragon Ogres and the Razor Gores forward. I and on this right flank, you can see I've done the same thing with the Razor Gore and the Chariot, with the Razor Gore leading and the Chariot protecting. You can watch the bait and switch tactics video I made about this little combination, which is quite good, given they're both exceptional core units, but the Razor Gore might be one of the best in the game. I was able to cast, I moved all those units in support around the Herdstone, and I was able to take down this unit of Deepwood Scouts in the middle with magic missiles on that first turn. What you can see is from there, we might have some more where Mark is going to move. He's moved his Glade Riders out to the wing, which has been pretty good for me because carrying the Oaken Stave, even though it's got 27 inches, it's going to create some space for my wizards on the right-hand side to be able to get out of Dispel. So they look like they're going to come around the back, out of charge arc. These Wild Riders here are in an interesting position. So there's a low linear object here. They will be able to charge next turn, whatever I bring through. In the middle, what's happened is the Treekin have moved into a position to sort of block me from coming any further forward. and with the Razor Gore, and then look to make some charges here. There wasn't a lot of action from Mark in the first turn. I had popped the Chalice of Dark Rain, so his shooting was at half range. That like didn't do a lot. He didn't have a ton of shooting as the Wood Elf player, but it meant it really took next to no damage on that first turn. It sort of diluted some of those ranges. Maybe shooting on fours became fives, that sort of thing. So you can see those Wild Riders on the right hand side are also going to have, he's moved them perpendicular to be able to maximize their charge arc on the Razor Gore or the Tuskor Chariot over there. So that's sort of where we end up after the first turn. It's hard. We're moving towards this format with the 2D White Dwarf style battle reports because from the photos, sometimes it can be difficult to see. I want to thank the Rank and Flank podcast again for putting this together. I think starting to get the hang of how to use it, but you can see quite clearly some of that movement where I look like I'm sort of on the full send up the middle, have been able to drive the gigantic spawn a long way forward. But you can see that those shaman have moved to the right and are going to be able to create some distance between this level 4 that's now swung out to this wing. Later on, that's going to be a problem because that unit is able to sort of take this herdstone pretty easily. But at the same time, you can see that sort of compressed nature of his setup and how it could feel very threatening as these units come towards him. On the same side, the Wild Riders having moved around and evaded those charge arcs for what I'm trying to do. So in the middle on the next turn, the spawn gets in, has to really hit that unit in the front. Something I've talked about in the tactics video is this maneuver of the Shaggoth just marching straight ahead. We've had videos in the past about Woods and taking the low roll on a charge and how bad that can be. So if I have to take the lowest dice roll, I'm only moving 1 or 2 inches forward and I'm going to get stuck in that forest. The other advantage here is if I march forward and then am able to if he overruns, the combat is taking place on my turn. So if I get the restrain and reform, which is what this game is really mostly about, it seems sometimes, I have the advantage of deciding to charge in again or to have reformed and face and charge something else. I've moved the Razor Gore up into a blocking position. They're not, it wouldn't have made the charge anyway. So the idea there is that these frenzied Wild Riders are going to have to close the door. And you can see that there's quite a careful arc here so that when they hit, they will close and they're not going to accidentally contact this chariot. The chariots also come forward. Really, I figured it would just get shot to death. Mark sort of queried whether this was the right thing to do. At this stage, I'm just trying to hem everything in. In hindsight, maybe keeping both of these units back to protect the herdstone on the left might have been a good idea, even if they had got shot over time. The reality here is it's probably going to lose, but I thought it would buy enough time for these guys to get in and cause carnage. I've charged with the Razor Gore here because Mark had laid a pillar of fire next to my Dragon Ogres, or it had stopped next to my Dragon Ogres. So I wanted to sort of charge all of them into the Treekin, but again, the low roll situation meant that I could have failed that charge with the Dragon Ogres, and if I do fail that charge, then what ends up happening is I am going to, well, the middle is going to collapse. I really need to keep the momentum. So I'm really almost throwing this Razor Gore away. At the time, I figure, look, it's going to die. His Treekin are stuck in that arc. But cleverly, when he wins this combat against the Razor Gore, Mark passes his reform test and does a 270-degree reform. So he's allowed to move through my Shaggoth while he's moving, as long as when he ends his movement, he's facing a different direction. So as I was saying, with that march move forward with the Shaggoth, to sort of control the restrain and reform on my turn. Ultimately, that's what Mark was able to do. So really, my best play here was to just march the Razor Gore in unintuitively, and we'll go through, that's going to be go through in the video. So, you can see the Vestigour have sort of come across as well. Probably a mistake in the end. I was worried about needing to roll rally tests and that they would just get shot. But maybe they could have been more threatening to those Glade Riders than I would have thought. Beneath that, you can see I've also put the Razor Gore over here to deflect or redirect those Wild Riders on the right flank. And the Tuskor Chariot has moved because of the woods. It's sort of moved into a position where it can charge next turn without having to um, worry about that dangerous terrain test. On Mark's turn, so Mark wins those combats as I discussed. My Dragon Ogres win against his Tree King, but his Tree King are stubborn. I don't do enough damage. I sort of whiff the attacks a little bit. The Spawn predictably smashes through the Deepwood Scouts and takes the space given to him. The Shaggoth is left surprisingly on its own. And then the War Dancers, his War Dancers charge my chariot, do short work of it. His Wild Rider charges my Razor Gore. I hold rather than flee here because the flee would have sort of popped me out the back. I want the Wild Riders to be stuck there so I can then charge with the Spawn. In the middle, Mark sends his other Treekin into the side of my Dragon because it's not looking really good. This was the tournament for Tree Whack. Had his moment. He had played Tree Whack against me before, but in this instance, the Tree Whacks were really good. Against Dragon Ogres, they're great. On a 3+, you're taking that hit without armor saves, and they're just chipping away, doing damage. But over time, with five of them left, I seem to take an enormous amount of hits from them, and they're eventually going to win that combat. On the bottom, the Wild Riders make predictable work of this Razor Gore and are going to be forced to overrun as well. So a bit of it's a bloodbath at the moment. You can see where the skulls are. Those are units that died. I'm not particularly unhappy with where the situation is at. I've got my wizards in the center of the board. They're out of range of dispel. That's sort of what my hammers are all still doing work. My Shaggoth and the gigantic spawn. I have been able to bring on the Minotaurs in ambush behind this house. Um, and then on top of that, you can see that like I'm sort of closing in, but you're just running out. I'm running out of units to do work. So it's sort of an interesting thing with Warhammer. Like I think the game really favors control elements at the moment. If you're playing this sort of horde army, even coming forward, you have to just lose so many troops like Razor Gores due to attrition. Like the idea of like winning by 2,000 points really is more about how maneuverable you are rather than how tough you are in combat. Like the Beastmen are incredible once they get into combat, but getting there, you tend to hemorrhage half your army a lot of the time, which is a lot of fun in many ways because there's a lot of feints and movement tricks, but at the same time, it's not something that you can rely on that you're going to have all of your army left at the end of the game to get some sort of massive victory, which matters a lot in many tournaments. So you can see that I've sort of been had to pushed away from these quarters as well, which is a big deal. But even though I've got this standard bearer come on ambush here, these you're going to see how the skirmish rules make the war dancers incredibly maneuverable. So yeah, to start my next turn, the Shaggoth is able to declare an attack on the Glade Guard unit in Mark's back right flank, and they fail their terror test and go off the board. And then beyond that, I had another unit of ambush scores come through. So that photo is there already, but that photo is representing that I was able to roll 11 hits on the summoning and then 10 wounds on this unit of archers, which was great. So that wiped them out, stripping them away, leaving the sorceress, who I was then able to finish off with Ruby Ring. So I cleaned up that whole unit with magic missiles. Still one of the most powerful things in the game, I believe. And definitely the hammer part of Beastmen. I came away from this tournament thinking you absolutely have to run magic missiles without ranged attacks. You just get run around. That's what you need to do to sort of control these small skirmishing units, which in this game I sort of lost control of. So at this point, I'm rolling forward. The chariot's now free to do other sorts of work. The wizards have done their job, but they've been herded, so to speak, into the middle of the board. Mark counters by sending his Sisters of the Thorn into my five beastmen. The ward save saved all of my attacks, and Hammerhand was able to win. He was able to win combat by one and run me down. An interesting combat happened in the middle of the board where I sort of had to expose my front-facing shaman to get that angle to shoot some of these other units, and he was able to strip away a number of the others with his own ranged attacks, and that meant I had a close range charge from the Treekin on the shaman, and I maybe could have fled, but I sort of thought, well, I want them to stay there so that the next turn I would be able to charge with my own units. Unfortunately, the Treekin, I fled nine, Mark pursued nine, and my guy ended up dying. So on the other side, you can see that the War Dancers have swung around after beating the Chariot to attack my Minotaurs. They made short work of the one in front and were able to win combat by enough that the other Minotaur failed his break test and ran off the board. So there goes my standard there. Really, that was it for this game. It was with so many units, and a lot of highly technical play. We that was it. I think we got one more turn, and I miscast Ruby Ring and Viletide straight away. So I did some moving around. Um, and on top of that, then I think Mark also just moved into some positions to take board quarters. But given that he already had the Glade Riders on my Herdstone, getting 200 victory points, in-game victory points, and that table quarter, beating the Minotaurs meant that he was uncontested in this table quarter. The War God did survive, but that Bestigor unit was shot to death. Um, the Wargore had made it to the other quarter. I won this quarter with the last unit of ambushing gores who managed to come on here because his sisters weren't wholly and it didn't end up wholly within one table quarter, which was interesting. But I think overall he scored about 300-ish more kill points in the game, what's equivalent to an 11-9 in tournament points, and then gained 4-1 on battle points. So overall it was 15-10 or 12-8, and then I think he was 16-9 his way. So yeah, an interesting game in sort of the micro of Warhammer, like in this sense, like units, there weren't any, I don't even know whether a ranked, I don't think there was a ranked unit in the game. And whether or not that's up your taste is interesting, but it did take a really long time to play. And I didn't feel like Mark and I were taking a long time to make decisions. There were just so many little pockets of things going on that it took a long time. Well played to Mark. A key in hindsight, I think on the left, I made mistakes and I could have defended that a bit better. And he had to fight tenaciously to hang on. And the Treekin held their own in the middle of the board, which for a unit that we were all saying was a laughing stock 6 months ago, they were the sort of the standout in this tournament. And the Wood Elf players, again, an army that we've sort of poo-pooed a little bit on this channel, came up trumps. So congratulations to them, but thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.